Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Forever Forward podcast. I'm Sid and I'm your co-host for this episode alongside Umesh. Today's
Yes, sir.
episode is on the hi hi. Today's episode is on the hot topic of AI and how it could revolutionize maintenance scheduling as we know it. We've seen AI transforming so many jobs and redefining standards for all kinds of teams. But still, a lot of time and manual effort is spent on tasks like maintenance scheduling and allocation, which often leave teams drained and with little room for more important work. Could AI take over and perhaps automate such tasks? By the end of this episode, we'll have tried to answer some of these burning questions, and I have come up with three of them. Here's the first one.
Sure.
With the
It
amount of
definitely seems,
with,
Siddharth, sorry, it definitely seems that, I would like to compliment you. You look a lot deeper today. The white shirt or the t-shirt looks good. And just wanted to compliment you on that. But I see that you
I
were so,
had a haircut. I had a haircut also, so you can probably see more of me.
oh, yes, I do realize. That's why you were looking changed. And I thought that there's something different. Or maybe you would have taken a shower today. Early.
I did actually.
All right, let's dive into the questions, mate. Sorry
Yeah, the
for
first one.
deviation.
So with the amount of time and effort that's going into tasks like scheduling maintenance, is it still viable for teams to do it manually? Or as in, if not, what's the shift that's needed?
So, I mean, again, like in most of my responses, I've said that we need to look at a potential shift from the perspective of what is the business looking at. So, absolutely agree when you say that in the conventional method, you've had scheduling and allocation teams, you've had command center or help desk people. I mean, you can take it different names, but there have been certain team members who've been tasked to schedule, allocate, track if the top job has been done, so on and so forth. Um, right, and that's a considerable spend, and more importantly, it takes them away from core jobs that can be done from the perspective of quality assessment, so on and so forth, which I think we'll touch upon later. So, as every engineering FM company, whichever company is engaged in operations and maintenance across the asset lifecycle, is trying to move to a data-led, a more agile way of doing operations and maintenance. This is an area which will come up for improvement. So, to long like a shorter answer to your question, absolutely, it's viable for the scheduling and the entire allocation process to be more automated, where they could still be supervisory role, but still not a lot of elementary role for team members there. And the shift needed is pretty much to say that you pretty much automate what can be automated through process automation. In that sense, yeah. And again, you would see that happening for companies which are reevaluating their entire operations and maintenance process. So it's important to understand that you can't look at this one piece in isolation and say, I'm going to make a change here. You are looking at the entire process of the way you run operations and maintenance and saying, how am I making changes across all the processes? And scheduling and allocation happens to be one of the key processes of the entire sort of value chain when you look at from that perspective.
Okay. So the very exciting question number two is, does AI have a role to play here? And if yes, how can it transform the way scheduling is done today?
I mean, uh, I will broadly answer it from the point of view. If you look at robotic process automation, RPA, that technology terminology has been around for quite some time. I mean, what generative AI particularly, and the reason I'm only saying of the generative AI has nothing to do with this particular component, but what the introduction of ChatGPT and the fact that a wider use, or I mean, not a wider use, but a wider engagement of general public with AI interfaces has allowed people to look at potential opportunities like they would have never imagined before. So there, I certainly feel that it has made RPA more viable and acceptable. So it's like I always say this to people that if you have the bigger evil and the lesser known evil, you'll probably choose the lesser evil. So people were running away from RPA for quite some time, but as soon as AI has come in, all of a sudden, the automation is a more accepted, sort of phenomena. So to that extent, I would say that this is absolutely right. Uh, I, when you look at scheduling and allocation, So, for example, when you look at a parallel use case, when you look at logistics, there is a lot of permutation and combination that needs to be done in terms of dispatch, so on and so forth. When you look at the maintenance scheduling in a facility which is centralized, there are certain variables which need to be taken into account. There are not a lot of variables which need to be taken into account. So potentially the use of AI may not be very significant, but when it comes to decentralized facilities where you want to take into consideration the distance that someone has to cover, where is the person going to go from, right, so on and so forth, absolutely. I mean, we will see transformations happening there and a wider use of AI in general happening in both use cases.
What forms could this AI take? Like, as in, could it be as an AI assistant or the AI chatbot? And how will teams use it and benefit from it in their actual real life scenarios?
So when you look at scheduling and allocation, if we stick to that, it is only going to change the lives of the people who are engaged in scheduling and allocation. The end engineer or technician really, in fact, the lives there would also change. So I'll answer it in two aspects. One, what form will it take for people who are into scheduling and allocation? It will largely become an autopilot, and which would mean a lot of things will be done automatically. And there could be certain tweaks that one would want to do, and that could be only supervisory in nature. So I don't expect this to be more of a co-pilot. I expect this to be more of an autopilot as far as scheduling and allocation is concerned. It becomes a co-pilot or, like, let's say, a supervisory role where you want to tweak how you want to optimize your scheduling and allocation. So that's the way, that's the only way, that's the end perspective I see. How it changes for the end technician or engineer who's going to do the job. So currently, when you look at most CMMSs would have a lot of tasks all shown. So you probably have 30, 40, 50, 60 tasks. But on a day, you can only do given number of tasks. On a week, in a week, you can only do a given number of tasks. Where we see the opportunity is dynamic allocation, dynamic representation of what are the tasks that you could focus on today. Like, they can be simple rule-based as well. So that can be done, but that's not being done. So that's where I see two areas where the impact can happen. One is for the core scheduling and allocation team, where it becomes an autopilot, and for the end user, the further aspect of it could be towards saying, what should I attend today? What's more critical? I mean, I know that in this week I need to do 40 tasks, but if I'm picking up on one task, which is the other task that I can sort of club with this task, so that it's nearest, more effective, so on and so forth. So all of that, and I mean, the more I've been personally thinking about it, I've been thinking more about logistics, right? It's a similar, it's like if you ordered a delivery, right, and if there is a delivery to be done for your next door neighbor as well, the person won't come twice. The person would club that, right? So I think there are dramatic changes to be made, all to bring in efficiencies. And again, I would just like to conclude my response over here. All of this will need exploration, will need time and effort, but the companies and the leaders who are going to do it are the ones who are ready to today envisage and say, we're going to change the way we conduct our entire operations and maintenance process, and not the ones who take a piecemeal approach.
So yeah, we know like what AI is capable of in terms of reducing time and effort that goes into repetitive tasks like scheduling. But I believe the most important question is like, how do organizations build a strong foundation for success when it comes to using AI for their maintenance efforts?
So I think what, like we mentioned in the newsletter that we published, that the reason you want the scheduling and allocation to be automated to a large extent is that you want to free up those hours to go into quality assessment, which isn't happening right now. Compliances. So, for example, hundreds of tasks are being done, no one's the mod. I mean, even the model day CMMS does not have data quality assessments baked in. So, which means if someone has closed a task, has it been done effectively, so on and so forth, are the responses in order, so on and so forth, doesn't get done. So you would rather want to make sure that the freed up hours go there, which can then potentially, allow you to sort of at some point in time use other forms of AI, generative AI, look at using qualitative data along with quantitative data, so on and so forth. So again, as I said, these are some measures that can be done, taken in the short to medium term, and some in the medium to long term. And that is where I think, go back to my point, that it's not a piecemeal approach. You can't just look at saying, I'll change this and I'll not do anything else. So I'd highly recommend organizations not to think of it as a productivity hack, but to think of it, while it's a productivity hack, but also to think of it and saying, how do we do more, or how do we do things that we ought to be doing, which add to your differentiation, which add to your success in terms of either retaining contracts, getting new contracts. All of that is kind of baked in.
That was a lot to unpack in an episode of under 10 minutes. So
Indeed.
just as a quick wrap up of this episode, like firstly we talked about how scheduling needs to evolve beyond what it is now with the eventual move to data-led operations and maintenance. Then we explored all the ways AI can help teams reduce time and effort spent on scheduling and allocation.
Right.
Um, and then finally, how organizations can build a strong foundation for success by optimizing data quality and creating mechanisms for knowledge retention and transfer and such. So
Yeah, I mean, and just to add to that point, creating the foundation for knowledge bridge, so on and so forth, is saying that you free up the hours which are going on things from those team members,
yeah,
free up those hours and allocate those hours there. Yeah,
so yeah, which you can spend on more strategic, more exciting kind of stuff rather than
absolutely,
spending time on more repetitive tasks which AI can handle on its own.
absolutely.
So we come to the end of this episode. Um, I think it was an interesting episode.
Thanks,
I
Siddharth. Hopefully, the listeners will find it the same way, that it was exciting and useful for them. I mean, this
Yeah,
is an interesting, chapter in across FM, which has been which has been a conventional adopter of technology. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what's going to be happening in the next few days, months, weeks. But also a shout out to every of the listeners. If you are doing something interesting, or let's say if you're reading something which is more interesting and you want to be part of this conversation, feel free to hit Siddharth up on LinkedIn or me, and we'll be happy to engage with you as well on the conversation, or bring you into the conversation as well.
yeah, that would really help us also keep making content, which helps our listeners, and hopefully
Absolutely.
they'll keep listening with us. And
Absolutely.
see you in the next one.
Absolutely. See you in the next one. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.